Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all keeping well. This video, assuming that the internet holds up, the mobile data holds up. It's been very poor lately. It's definitely a put the kettle on video, and I want to talk about quantum mechanics. Now, before you run away, this directly relates to the state of the world, and even your life in the present, and why it's important, and what we can learn from it, and how we can take great hope in this reality changing or being paralleled for us. So I'll try to explain the concept as best I can in my layman's language. I'm by no means an expert, but it's a very interesting thing. And then I will still got this fucking dry throat. And then I will try to make it applicable to life as we know it today. Now, we really have to go back to the late Middle Ages, when the discovery of something called linear perspective was found out. Okay, I hate when you have that scratchy thing in your throat. Give me a second. Okay, linear perspective was discovered. If you look at perspective, there was no vanishing points, so therefore they didn't look realistic. So you might have a painting of, say, peasants tilling a field outside a castle in France that was done in the 1200s, 1100s, and the shapes are all wrong. The castle doesn't bend properly, and it doesn't look realistic. And by the late Middle Ages, moving into the Renaissance, people like Brunelleschi and Albrecht Dürer, they started to experiment with the concept of linear perspective. And this was the concept of vanishing points. And the vanishing points, when they were discovered, they used to use things like a piece of wood with string on it in a grid format and hold it up. And suddenly they would say, if I draw what exactly I see in this box, it's more realistic. And that's how they discovered linear vanishing points. And suddenly art became very different, but reality also became very different as well, because they could paint realistic paintings in terms of how our eyes perceive the real world. This changed everything in terms of things like architecture and lots of other things, and brought itself very deeply into science. Now, by the time the Renaissance was over, you had the like of Newton, who had established the sort of like physical model of the universe, based very heavily on the classical pagan world thinking. But this model of this Newtonian physics was basically a hard, even though he himself was like a magician and an alchemist, it was itself a hard and fast rule book that was quantified in Principia Mathematica. And we hear all these things about he discovered, gravity when an apple fell on his head. The man was an astounding intellect. And we already had things like Copernicus' heliocentric view of the reality of the spheres and of the solar system that took root. And so you had this sort of physics that was based upon Newtonian, heliocentric, Archimedean, but underpinning it all was a Newtonian physics, and that kept us all going until the late 1800s, when the fixed constants, Newtonian physics was hard and fast. There was no variations really. There was things called universal constants, like this. The speed of sound had a certain speed, the speed of light had a certain speed. When physicists started to notice anomalies in measurements, that there was no reason for it, but say two labs in different parts of the world might start getting different measurements on some kind of experiment. And the speed of light actually changed for a while. And this was actually such a scandal at the time, it was covered up. Speed of light slowed down. And they got around it by recalibrating the instruments and saying the instruments are wrong, not the speed of light. It's still a universal constant. But this wasn't good enough for certain people. And then a field broke away under Max Planck being the most famous. excuse me, we had two fields of um, of physics starting to develop. You had the Newtonian atomic physics of Einstein and so on that continued to sort of reiterate the Newtonian model of the universe. And then you had quantum physics. And quantum physics believed that there was some other determining factor that changed the nature of calculations. And this eventually gave rise to something called the Copenhagen experiment. The Copenhagen experiment is basically, or the double slit experiment, it's also called, when an observation was made of two subatomic particles and they started to go from being just stationary inertia particles to starting to flutter like a wave. And the remarkable and astounding revelation was discovered that the two particles only started to perform wave function when you looked at them. When you looked away, they didn't move. And therefore we had the whole thing of like, well, is the universe only an experience of observable reality? It doesn't really exist. We're only seeing it and making it. Our brains are making it happen. Our consciousness is making it happen. And this had been well documented in the Vedic Hindu tradition. It was known as the Maya, the illusion that's created by the unmanifest into the manifest by means of consciousness. And that's what the whole dialogue between Krishna and Prince Arjuna is, and that chariot is all about, is that the wave functions are actually created by you, but you still have to do them. It's part of the deal. So therefore, this concept of we looking at as subatomic particles and they coming to life, and when we look away, they stop. This was called coupling or entanglement. That we had our minds had a specific connection to the wave function. Okay. Now, everything in the universe is expressed as a wave function. The reason why it's everything in this universe is a vibrationary experience. It's all vibration sounds. It's all a sine wave with the attack and the decay, and then you have the cycles, which is along the bottom. But the wave function, the higher and the stronger the wave function, the more powerful the wave it is itself. So, therefore, an audio signal on a microphone is like this, but if you look at the cycles on a transmission of a main AC power line, it's gigantic. So it's the frequency of the cycles and the height and the scale. Now, and that's why I've been talking about the digital gin so much. The universe is analog and we're analog, okay? That's just a fact. Now, digital does not exist in nature, and that's why it's one of the reasons it's doomed. The only reason it's got this far is because we as analog beings have been entering our data and our emotions into the digital mainframe, and also things like photographs of the world. But that quantum function is going to collapse soon, as we have more deep fakes and the AI and things like this that are intrinsically anti-nature, which is where the globalists are going and why they're doomed. And this is why you're learning about quantum physics, quantum mechanics. So now, quantum mechanics, you hear a lot of new age fluff around that if you can make anything happen. I know a lot of people, I see comments all the time saying, I love Thomas Sheridan's videos. He was fantastic during the lockdowns. He really gave me hope, and it really kept me going, and it was wonderful. But when he starts talking about magic and the occult, I switch off. And that's understandable. I don't have a problem with you doing that. You don't have to be dogmatic about anything. I'm not looking to start a religion here. But why those things are important is the reason why what we had, we held. I'll give you I have used this medium here to cast magical spells constantly. And I know someone saying, what? And I said, I'll give you an example of a recent one. Now everyone in Ireland is saying that anyone who calls someone far right is really using code for working class. That spell worked. That's now out there in the consciousness. One I'm having difficulty with, it's not fully out there yet, is getting Irish people to call politicians by their second names, never by their first names. Okay, I'm getting there, but not there yet. And that's a hard one to break, and that's because the actual wave function that holds that one together is extremely tight, extremely tight. Now, I think one of the reasons I was successful with that spell of getting them to associate working class with far right is because I made a satire about it. If you watch back a few videos a couple of months ago, I was doing a satire of like Veruca O'Salt going that they should call them horrible, scummy working class people, daddy. And when she grew up, she was allowed to call them far right, but still had the same hatred rooted in the same thing. That was a magical spell, and it worked because I used a satire to bring that into manifestation. And that's why the occult and magic is real. The subatomic foam under fabric of the universe is extremely tight, okay? And that's why people have difficulty breaking it and changing their lives and changing reality. And one of the ways you can do it, of course, is through satire and humor, because this is why you never hear Brian COX. And I'm not going to do it now because brevity is the essence of wit. Wait, like a considerate lover, it's not all the time. I make you, I will drip feed it to you so the experience is more profound and beautiful. So you're not going to get that today. Brevity is the essence of wit, and I'm a considerate lover. But yes, so the subatomic fabric is extremely tight. Extremely tight. And satire is one of the ways you break through it. And this is why the jesters were so important in the medieval court, and bards and so on and things like this. They could take down a kingdom with a poem. In fact, in the Irish mythology, in the book of Invasions, the Druid American issues a satire against the Tuatha Dé Danann and destroys them. And he goes, "I am a satirist of the wind." And this is the power of poetry and art to hack through the subatomic fabric, the density of it. Now, people who are coupled strongly to a belief package are almost exclusively dependent upon the strength of that waveform in order to exist. So therefore, if your personal identity is wrapped up in a wave function regarding, say, a religion, a belief package, a relationship, an aspect of your self-identity, when that wave function collapses, and all wave functions collapse in time, you will collapse with it. I'll give you an example. You're in a cult and you believe that the saucer people are coming at 12 o'clock, this coming Sunday night, and you sit in the room waiting for the Space Brothers to arrive, and they don't arrive. The wave function collapses and you fall out of the cult. And everything you believed until that point, you literally fall into psychosis. That's why so many ex-cult members commit suicide and so on, because they were quantum entangled and completely coupled to that wave function of the Space Brothers coming in. Now, this is the reason why we and the tribes managed to get through the last 3 years unneedlecrafted. Because this is why they attack conspiracy theory. Fundamentally, what is conspiracy theory? Well, number one is what John Waters said, is what journalism should be and used to be. But number two, what conspiracy theory is, and the reason why the establishment hate us, is because conspiracy theory is cynicism towards the wave function of orthodoxy. Okay? And in order for orthodoxy, the system, the control grid, whatever you want to call it, in order for that to maintain its integrated structure, it has to have, adherence to the wave function, to its existence, to its belief package. Because we had indulged conspiracy theory for whatever reason, whether we were like that as kids like me, whether it was Kennedy, whether it was things like fluoride in the water, whether it was like 9/11, it doesn't matter. An element, as soon as you started to believe that certain conspiracies were real, you decoupled from that wave function, and it started to not have the same pull upon you. Okay. Now I saw a thing recently where they showed an American comedian, a black guy, and he was talking to a guy in the audience. Says, you mean to tell me that you don't believe that any any conspiracies has ever happened in history? And the guy was going, no, I don't. Now, this is literally what universities and colleges are producing now. People who believe that every aspect of human development was brought about completely by the goodness of politicians and altruism. And no, was never a scheme or a conspiracy ever in history. And that's when you are completely coupled with the wave function of orthodoxy. Okay? So what happens is when you will do anything, and that's why all the people with PhDs are all the ones who are the most fucked up and the most ones having the hardest time with the collapsing wave function, because the wave function of the previous thing is collapsing with the increasing failure of this scamdemic and all that entails with the needlecraft and everything else. That wave function is now collapsing. The same people who put badges up on their social media saying, I got my booster and I'm proud, are all not talking about it now. They can't deal with it. They can't talk about it. Why? Because then the wave function is collapsing and they're collapsing with it. Now, I'll give you an example. The cancel culture is a very good example of wave function, okay? People who imparted that cancel culture thing, calling up venues to have comedians taken out, whatever, art exhibits closed down, speaking events stopped, they develop a kind of a psychosexual attraction, compensatory thing towards that. You will find that generally they're women who are involved in relationships that are deeply unfulfilling for them. Usually they're involved with weak men or no man, and the compensation for the lack of a sexual, a strong sexual female identity is transferred then into cancel culture, and therefore they want to cancel everything, because for some reason part of their psyche has cancelled their own, eroticism and libido, or whatever, or led to continuous failures in relationships, therefore, and unsatisfying relationships, that therefore they develop a kind of a compensatory psychosexual orgasmic relationship with shutting down other, good cancel culture. So getting things cancelled. And they get a sexual thrill to compensate for the lack of that in their private life, or the lack of affection, even, or real affection, or a strong man. Usually, if they are involved in a relationship, these women are involved with like really weak, pathetic males. And they're charged by it. They have it. They say, "Oh, I got that comedian cancelled. Oh, I got that. We got that," and they're charged by it. But what happens is that doesn't last forever, and eventually the venues will say, "Fuck off," and put the phone down. And then you will see those people, those ones who are quantum entangled with cancel culture. They want to see them go down. Boy, Jesus. They like the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz. The face actually begins to fall off. The skin on their face actually falls off like melted wax. They rage. They age rapidly, because the only thing that was keeping them going in a psychic sense, and therefore a further biological sense, was this notion of the cancel culture. It was the only thrill they had, the only power they had. And when that wave function collapsed, they went down with it. So this is the beauty of us being conspiracy theorists. And this is one of the reasons I'm proud of being a conspiracy theorist, because it saved my ass in 2020 when I figured that this thing was a lot of bollocks. And now even when you have Time magazine, which is basically an outlet of the NSA, throwing doubts upon the whole thing, you know that the word is now being given out at the very top. Shut it down. It's over. And one of the things of people who are completely caught within the wave function is their inability to to have internal reference. A classic example is recently Justin Trudeau made a speech about how the truckers in Canada, not about how there's terrible tyrants in the world, and it's all about human freedom. And this is the guy who shut down the bank accounts of people who supported the truckers in Ottawa over the lockdowns. And people say, is he so unbelievably hypocritical? No, he's completely quantum coupled with that wave function. And when that wave function goes down, watch him go down. Watch them all go down. And it's going down. It's going down rapidly. And Ireland right now, you can see it happening in... I was looking around Twitter last night, and to see the so-called lefties, the champions of the working class, the hatred and the bile they showed against Irish working class people last night, well, that was the way functioning of them collapsing. They no longer have control over the working class. And the spell of calling, and people have figured out, I saw a video this morning by someone, I think it was the Irish Inquiry, and they were chasing two TV reporters in Ireland saying, why do you keep calling working class people far right? It's collapsed. And they can't get out of it, because you have a situation where in D4, Dublin 4, which is an affluent area, you have a huge hotel, Juries, which has 400 rooms in it. How many of the asylum seekers are in that one? Nothing. They're all in working class areas. Why? Because the middle class, although it's just like everything else, when they love climate change, but they all fly off the belly and all this kind of thing. They love diversity, but as long as it's not in their neighbourhood. And you can see now that the word far right has never been more associated with working class neighbourhoods and working class people. That spell has now been completely cast beautifully. And they can't get away with it. They can't. If you look at all the people who set themselves up against these people, they're all from the establishment. They're children of the establishment. They were all born with silver spoons in their mouth. The Burkean beautifully set it up yesterday when they said, because the left in Ireland are made up of like upper middle class, they're all terrified to go and a place like Ballymun. They're terrified. They wouldn't last 5 minutes. But they can be intimidating over the phone with cancel culture on Twitter and that kind of thing. But you could actually see their wave functioning collapsing in real time. And they were absolutely hysterical. Absolutely. I saw one of them try to blame Irish men for the murder of that poor girl in the Midlands last year, even though it was foreigners. But there's the lack of self-reflection and internal dialogue, and as the wave function collapses, it's incredible to observe. And that's why we are not suffering from myocarditis, AIDS, or clots from the transubstantiation of sacred needlecraft, because we were far right conspiracy theorists. They didn't mind the rich being conspiracy theorists, but when the working class got into it, then they got really upset because they knew they were losing control. And now, that's not to say all conspiracy theory is true or anything like that. Most of it, a lot of it is bollocks, actually. A lot of conspiracy theories out there is bollocks. And a lot of it is actually, set up by the intelligence services, like the shite, like the flat earth and all that crap. But the stuff that isn't, even if anything, is that if you look into anything, you're automatically decoupling from that wave function of orthodoxy, So this is why quantum physics is important. So when they went for their ultimate magic spell in spring 2020, those of us who had already indulged conspiracy theory went, I don't know about this. Where ones who hadn't and had slagged off it's like the meme I saw recently. The greatest thing about being a conspiracy theorist is not having myocarditis, and that's so true. That's what saved us. Nature loves novelty. If there's one thing that nature does not like, it is orthodoxy. It loves insurgency. It loves novelty. It loves chaos. Nature loves that. So basically, looking back on it now, those of us who avoided the needlecraft and were rooted in a kind of an interest in conspiracy theory or in conspiracy studies or that kind of thing, which all people should be. You should never trust your governments and politicians or corporations, for God's sake. We were not coupled to the same degree as the wave function as all the others who rolled their sleeves up and go, oh God, save me, save me, save me. And ultimately into a wave function that's collapsing in real time as we speak. This is the same. You see this entanglement with the Trump derangement syndrome. How many years now has Trump been out of office, and there's still people all they can talk about is Trump, 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 Trump. Can't talk about nothing else. They're quantum entangled with that. They've lost any other aspect to their humanity. It's been switched off. This is why, for years, I've been telling you, yes, all this shit is real. Now go paint a picture. Yes, all this shit is real. Now go grow some flowers in the garden. Yes, all that shit is real. Now go for a walk in the woods. Yes, all that shit is real. Now go play basketball. Yes, all that shit is real. Go bake a cake. I've been telling you that for years for the simple reason is it's real, but don't become quantum entangled with it. And if you become quantum entangled with it, you will go down with it when it goes down. You will go down with that faster than, you know, a 70s porn star in a taboo movie. You will go down. You will go down with that. And that doesn't mean you have to be staring into every single dark hole like an NHS proctologist. Not at all. But the fact that you have a cynicism, a healthy cynicism, is what detaches you from the wave function. Because ultimately, all reality and all experience is a result of that initial double slit experiment where they looked at the two particles and they stopped. They looked away. They looked away at the two particles and they started fluctuating, and then they looked away and they stopped. And because the observable reality was created by the consciousness and all of us together. And that's why I said, what we have, we hold. Stick by it. Just wait. Just wait. There was a great magical power in that two words. Just wait. I didn't say don't do it. I didn't say you'd be mad if you took it. I didn't say you'd be a fool or a loser if you take it, because I wasn't going to judge people who love their families and have to take care of their children and stuff like that. I'm worse into it. I just said, just wait. I left the actual process with you. There was no profane mandate in there. It was just wait. And I didn't say yes or no. I just said, just wait. And it's true. That's the same thing as silence, the great power in silence. There's also a great power in just waiting. Now, then some people might say, no, they say, well, then why do I believe in religion and stuff like that and spirituality? It's all created in my mind. No, but that's not the point. That doesn't make it any less real. It didn't make it any less real to Salvador Dali, who was died a devout Catholic, but also had a theoretical physics comp. And that's another thing. When you fuse like Newtonian physics and quantum physics together, you have theoretical physics. So, and you have this is why you have people like, you never hear Brian COX, not going to do it, not going to do it. I am a considerate and measured lover. You don't have Brian Cox do that because they don't want you never learned about this in school, because they don't want you believing that it really is all a load of bollocks. The whole reality, it's all a load of bullshit, literally. And they don't want you because that wouldn't work for governments or anything else. And there's a hatred of quantum theory, even though quantum mechanics is the most rigidly tested and retested field in science, validated constantly. There's still materialistic scientism types who absolutely hate it. They hate it, but they're also using as well a lot of this whole thing of the gender thing that's going on today, gender ideology. A lot of that is them trying to play around with the wave function to get people attached to the belief that they're no gender. And they've done it with weak people who would and these are the kind of people who would otherwise be susceptible to walk-ins from entities and things like that. But the walk-in this time is government and culture. So the wave function is collapsing, okay? Big time. And the ones who are coupled to it are going down with it. And maybe the transubstantiation of the sacred needlecraft from the booster on, because the ones who didn't get the booster seem to be okay. It seems to be from the booster on. And the boy, I say boy, they are collapsing with the wave function too. And that's why they won't even talk about it. They won't even talk about it. You see all the people that are dying suddenly? No, they're not. It's always been like this. What? No, let's talk about this. I don't want to talk about it. That's because the wave function that they've rigidly glued themselves to has collapsed, or is collapsing, and they can't handle it. And the reason why it's not affecting us is because of our indulgence of conspiracy theory and cynicism, and not trusting the man, is what's actually got us out of it, got us to this point. Now, back to the religion thing. So you'd say, was there any point in me believing? No, Dali used to host conferences. Salvador Dali, the painter, the paintings, Corpus Hypercubus, which is the thumbnail for this video I just put up, that's is a fusing of his belief is in theoretical physics and is Catholicism. And this is why he had no conflict with both, because this is why orthodoxy in anything is wrong, but a faith is strong. That faith is, see, it's not blind faith and it's not orthodoxy. It's a spiritual sense of knowing. And that's a beautiful. So if you have a true belief in your version of Jesus and that kind of thing, and it's not based on like the priest told me this or the rabbi told me this or the cantor told me this or the whatever you have in other religions, the guru. Uh, it's because it's just a sense of, it's just like my paganism. I just know this is right for me. I don't need to actually dress up like a yurt rapist holding a staff. Outside. Look at me. I'm a druid. I feel it deep inside me, and it's like it's enough. It's enough. And so Dali's Corpus Hypercubus and his other painting of his own interpretation of Saint John of the Cross, the other one where you look down with the three-dimensional one looking down on the crucifixion. I think that's in the National Gallery in Glasgow. That was all based on a drawing from the the 1300s or the 1200s of a very complex perspective painting, a drawing of the crucifixion that was in some monastery that was in France or Spain that Dali had seen. And it's considered a miracle in the Catholic Church because the monk or whoever drew it drew perfect perspective in the time before perspective had been created by the European artists. And therefore he fused it all together in Corpus Hypercubus and the St. John of the Cross painting in Dali did. And because he understood that it was all the same trajectory. That's why I started Thomas' perspective at the beginning, to bring us to this point now near the end of the video. So this is why we're getting through this unscathed. This is why, because our cynicism through indulging, this is why they hated us. This is why they hated they mocked and slagged off and attacked conspiracy theorists, because they knew who did they go to war with when the actual pandemic started? Us. Why? Because they knew we were not connected to the wave function of this scam that they were running because of our previous cynicism. And they were doing everything to make sure that others in society didn't listen to us. And they did a great job of it. They did a great job of it. That's why they said, oh, people who are wary about the rollout of this, this and the lack of testing of this needlecraft, they're just conspiracy theorists who believe Elvis is living on the moon and stuff like that. We just waited, and what we had, we held. This is why I know it could, some people come on here and they got all, and then hear me talking about magic and occult, but that's why, dudes. That's why. Because they are operating systems that allow you to circumnavigate the tight structure of orthodoxy in order to make your life a lot more easier and a lot more safer as well. And the fact that we don't have AIDS and myocarditis or those mother hydra's babies inside us, that was the power of it. That's what happened. That's what it was for. That's why we're here, and it's that simple. And continue that way. Don't see another thing on our side. How you can become quantum entangled with it is fear. Oh, I'm so frightened. They're going to come to me house, tie me down, and inject me. You're entangled with it. My attitude: they're not going to do that. They're just not going to do that. Don't worry about it. The same, that kind of fear. Oh, they're going to come and put me in a FEMA camp. This kind of thing. No, don't be like that. Oh, the end of the world is coming. We're finished. We're finished. That's shite. Transhumanism is going to finish us all off. No, it's going to finish off the ones who are quantum entangled with that, not you. You have to learn to This is why these things are important. This is why they never taught you this in school. They didn't want you to know this. And so, therefore, be happy. Be happy. And be aware that there's no fixed constants in the universe. That Newtonian physics was superseded by quantum physics, and the scientists who weren't uh, brave enough to throw their lot in with quantum mechanics call themselves theoretical physicists. But it doesn't matter. It's an inescapable thing. This is why they build particle colliders. This is why they obsessed over Higgs bosons, because for all their money and science they pour into it, they just know it's a simple basic fact that the universe is created out of a vibration, and that vibration is caused by human consciousness. And the human consciousness brings that vibratory aspect into manifest. Dudes, keep giving me good vibrations. You gotta do good vibrations. Da, 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 boo. Sanguinosis.